He had traveled for days. The question was a physical weight, a stone in his gut. Was his best friend, the man who had jumped from a bridge just weeks before, burning in hell? The church was clear. Suicide was a mortal sin. Self-murder. It slammed the door on God's mercy. Everyone knew it. But this man had to hear it from someone who walked between worlds. He had to ask the one person on earth who might actually know the answer. He had to ask Padre Pio, and he was terrified of what he might hear. To understand the weight of his journey, you have to understand San Giovanni Rotondo in those days. It wasn't a tourist destination. It was a spiritual hospital, a last resort for the desperate. People flocked there from all over the world, drawn by whispers of a humble friar who bore the wounds of Christ. A man who could read souls, who battled demons in the night, and who spoke with a bluntness that could shatter you or save you. The air itself felt thick with prayer and pain. Our man was just one face in a sea of suffering, each person carrying their own impossible question. His friend. He couldn't reconcile the man he knew with the act he committed. They had grown up together, shared secrets, built their lives side by side. But a darkness had crept into his friend's life. A financial ruin, a crisis of faith, a crushing weight that no one else could see. He had tried to help, but the conversations grew shorter, the eyes more distant. Then came the news. He had walked to the local bridge and, in a final, terrible moment, stepped into the void. The grief was one thing, but the gnawing certainty of his friend's damnation, that was a special kind of torture. The teaching was, and for centuries had been, brutally straightforward. To take one's own life was to usurp a power that belonged to God alone. It was seen as the ultimate act of despair, a final no to God's grace. In many places, the church would deny funeral rites. The person would be buried in unconsecrated ground. It was a social and spiritual damnation. This was the theology our grieving friend was carrying with him. Not just a fear, but a doctrinal certainty. He wasn't hoping for a comforting platitude. He was hoping for a miracle, a loophole in the divine law that he couldn't see. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, his turn came. The confessional was small, dark, and smelled of old wood and incense. On the other side of the screen was the living saint. The man's heart hammered against his ribs. He went through his own confession, his sins feeling trivial and distant compared to the real reason he was there. His voice cracked as he finished. He took a deep breath, the air tasting like dust and fear. "Father," he began, "I need to ask you about someone else. A friend of mine. He took his own life." The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Padre Pio did not hesitate. His voice, known for its gruffness, cut through the silence. "Why do you come to ask me about him?" the friar demanded. "You know where he is. He is in hell." The words hit the man like a physical blow. Hell. The worst possible fear. Confirmed. All that way, all that hope, shattered in a single sentence. Tears welled in his eyes. The stone in his gut became a mountain. He had his answer. It was the one he expected, the one the church taught. But hearing it with such finality from a man like Pio was an unbearable verdict. The man began to sob, his body shaking with the finality of it all. He had condemned his friend with his own question. But then, Padre Pio spoke again. His tone had changed. It was no longer the voice of a judge, but of a seer. "But listen," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Listen. Between the bridge and the river. He had a moment. He saw. And in that instant, he felt true terror, not for the fall, but for the sin he had committed. And he made an act of perfect contrition. The man in the confessional looked up, his mind struggling to grasp what he was hearing. What is an act of perfect contrition? It's not just being sorry you got caught. It's not even primarily about fear of punishment. Perfect contrition is sorrow for sin born out of pure love for God. It's the soul recognizing, in a flash, the infinite goodness it has offended. It's a complete, total turning back to God. The Church teaches that this act, even without a priest, even without a spoken word, can wipe away mortal sin. Padre Pio was revealing a hidden moment of grace, a divine intervention in the space between a choice and its consequence. The man was reeling. So he is saved, he stammered, hope flooding back into him. Padre Pio's voice was firm again. He is saved, he confirmed, but he is not yet in paradise. He is in purgatory. His soul needs your prayers, a great deal of your prayers. This was the other side of the brutal answer. The friend hadn't escaped the consequences. He had been saved from eternal loss, but the damage done by his final act, the temporal punishment due to his sin, still needed to be purified. The man's grief was suddenly transformed. It was no longer a passive sorrow. It was a mission. This story completely reframes our understanding of time and mercy. We live life second by second. We think of a fall from a bridge as lasting maybe 2-3 seconds. But God is outside of time. For the soul, that final moment could contain an eternity of choice. The Catechism of the Catholic Church now reflects this understanding. It explicitly states we should not despair of the eternal salvation of persons who have taken their own lives. God can provide them with the opportunity for salutary repentance. The story of Padre Pio was a living example of this very doctrine. It's crucial to understand what the real sin is here. The act of suicide is the fruit. The root is despair. Despair is the deliberate and complete abandonment of hope in God. It's not just sadness or depression, which are often illnesses. Despair is a choice to believe that God's mercy is smaller than your misery. It's calling God a liar when he promises forgiveness. What Padre Pio's vision shows is that even for someone who has fallen into the pit of despair, hope is never truly lost until the absolute final breath. God's grace is always there, waiting for the smallest crack to enter. This wasn't an isolated incident. Padre Pio's life was filled with encounters with souls from purgatory. He spoke of them as a constant reality. Monks who had been lazy in their duties would appear, asking for masses to be said. People he had known in life would show up in his cell, begging for prayers to shorten their time of purification. To him, the veil between this world and the next was incredibly thin. He saw salvation not as a simple pass, fail test, but as a journey that often continued after death. This context makes his answer to the grieving man not just a one-off story, but part of a consistent spiritual worldview. The man left that confessional a completely changed person. The crushing, helpless grief was gone. In its place was a profound sense of duty. He had a job to do. His friend needed him. His life was no longer about mourning what was lost, but about actively participating in his friend's salvation. He offered prayers, masses, and sacrifices for the repose of his friend's soul. The brutal answer had, in the end, become the most merciful gift imaginable. It gave him purpose. It gave him a way to continue to love his friend. So what does this 100-year-old story mean for us? In a world where so many are struggling with mental health and despair, it's a radical message of hope. It tells us never to judge the state of a soul. It reminds us that the battle is not over when we think it is. And for those who have lost someone in this tragic way, it offers a profound consolation. It doesn't erase the pain, but it replaces the torment of uncertainty with the powerful mission of prayer. It tells us that our love and our prayers can still cross the veil, that they still matter. It's a reminder that no darkness is so complete that God's mercy cannot find a way in, even if it's just between the bridge and the river.